Hi there everyone, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today for this webinar, having a look at some of the AP music theory content in Auralia Musition and just ways in which that may be able to support your students' learning. I know these are kind of, challenging times for music educators and educators in general all around the world, so appreciate you taking the time out to have a chat with us. As we all know, there are so many different kinds of education formats at the moment, from face-to-face to hybrid courses to classes that are being delivered entirely online. So certainly challenging times for everyone. All right, let me just bring up my little screen share here. Actually, before I move on, my name's Tim Wilson. And I am joined today by just a couple of my colleagues, Tim Solly and Peter Lee, who will be manning the Q&A area. Let me just bring up my screen share for you. Okay, so for a long time there has been some support for AP music theory content in Auralia Musition. That was expanded a fair bit last year to match a lot of the content in the new CED, and we've expanded it again recently, and we have a kind of brand new content update that is available for anyone who wants it. We can put that through at any stage. That includes access to a whole range of new worksheets and curriculum materials that are all specifically mapped to the AP music theory curriculum. So this includes things like mapped syllabus levels for most of the units, worksheets, test assessments to support all of that learning for your students, and then some exam level worksheets that are, more focused around the exact format of the questions as they appear in exams, so students can actually get, good solid practice at working on some of those question types. Obviously, I guess at this point of the year, no one is entirely sure what the exam itself will look like at the end of this academic year. But I guess at this stage, everyone is powering on and following the guidelines as outlined by the College Board. Okay, so some of the for those of you who are already using the programs, you'll be well aware of these points. But for anyone who's not, I guess some of the key things that Auralia Musition can deliver, especially in these times of remote learning, just giving students the opportunity to do self-paced learning and practice by themselves, working through the various topics and levels, and of course they're getting that immediate feedback via the auto assessment that can just help drive drive their learning and just encourage them and give them that feedback they need so that they can improve their skills. Obviously, also these tools allow them to, in many of the topics, have an almost infinite number of drills to practice on. So I guess especially for ear training concepts, it can be that sort of practice is essential. It's certainly not the sort of thing you can cover entirely in class. If students aren't doing that regular practice, then their oral skills in particular are going to struggle if they're not maintained, developed, and drilled over longer periods of time. And of course, finally, the tools do allow students to and you as instructors to potentially identify problem areas and then deliver specific tasks that can help to target those issues and drive particular worksheets content to support that learning. All right, so today we're going to start looking at the kind of exam level content and then basically work our way back through some of the curriculum content to more of the fundamentals side of things and all the building blocks. All right, so first off, we'll jump in and have a look at some of the kind of free response dictation type questions that are in the course. Again, these are all automatically assessed, and The content has been specifically developed at the exam level to be based around the harmonic and the melodic vocabulary as it's presented in the theory exams themselves. So for melodic dictation, you will get a mix of questions, some which includes a bit of chromaticism, so it will most likely be the raised fourth degree, moving to the fifth degree of the key, things like that. So the content is specifically mapped in terms of all that vocabulary and the length of the excerpts and the rhythmic vocabulary as well to what is actually delivered in the exam. So it provides a real contextual kind of learning and exam practice for your students. All right, I'll jump into Auralia now. To start off with, and let me just check I've got my Zoom audio device selected for playback. Okay, so I've just jumped straight into the tests area of Auralia, which delivers all our ear training content, as opposed to Musician, which has all the fundamentals and music theory side of things. So as far as student access, they don't see any of these goodies in the middle here that we're looking at. We deliver tests to them through the home or the tasks area, and they can also do practice in the practice area here. So we'll chat a bit more about that briefly, but essentially your students will have access to this syllabus, units 1 to 8, and all the levels and content in here are already set up and mapped to the CED units. And I guess as far as presenting, broader pathways for your students to work through, the levels are kind of clearly laid out here for them as they work through each of the topics. But what we're going to do is we're going to jump into the tests area. I'm just going to preview some of these. So these are labeled as tests, but most instructors use them as weekly worksheets to support whatever they're delivering. And you'll see here there are a number of groups. So grouped into each unit here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the area we're going to jump into initially is right down the bottom here. So we're going to have a look at some of the exam specific questions here. So let's go for free response 1 and 2, some melodic dictation. And I might actually just make a quick copy of this worksheet. And if we get time today, we might chat a little bit more about some of the customization side of things. But essentially, anything that we provide, you can always either copy and edit it to meet more specific kind of curriculum needs or teaching needs that you may have, or also create your own. Okay, so let's just preview this. So again, this is just our teacher kind of preview area where we can create and assign content. But I'm just going to jump in here, click on the little preview button. It has 2 entries and a total of 4 questions, and I'm just running in preview mode here. Okay, so over on the left here, we can see our little navigator that shows us each of the 4 questions that are presented, the treble clef, bass clef questions. And let's have a listen. All right, so let's just pop a few random goodies in here. Oh, now bar is full. All right, we can obviously replay it. This particular worksheet is set up to just have 3 replays on it. If you copy this worksheet, you can extend all of those replays to be have as many replays as you like. All right, so the student enters their answer and hopefully does much better than that. All right, and then they can clearly preview their answer and play that back against the correct answer. And you can see here, I've been given partial credit for some of the pitches that I did get correct. And I guess melodically, the vocabulary that's used here in this particular question, refers to elements of the melodic minor scale in combination with, descending melodic minor as well. So again, those elements are drawn and based off the types of, melodies and questions that are delivered in the actual exam. And of course, I can play this back and. And I might play you back my little effort there. All right, so question 2, let's have a quick listen to this one as well. All right, pop in our answer. Okay, so this melody is a good example of where a little bit of chromaticism is introduced as per the exam to just challenge students and create those exam kind of specific contexts. And then again, this particular worksheet again continues on to have more questions delivered in the bass clef this time. Again, it's just as general practice for your students. Now, the great thing about these exams, these worksheets that are set up, is that these draw from larger question pools. So your students can attempt this particular worksheet multiple times and they will get different sets of questions each time, but still drawing from that core fixed curriculum content that is really relevant and specific for the exam. So these are not kind of fixed beasts, so students can certainly do them multiple times. You will note up here as well that if you would like your students to have, more flexibility in a particular exam, you can, on the test itself, you can allow them to be able to adjust the tempo and control a few other things as they work through the test itself. All right. So I won't spend any more time on the melodic dictation questions. If you are assigning these to your students, we have a bunch of other webinars and training videos that show you how to kind of copy, edit these, assign these to your classes. It's all pretty quick and easy. And as I mentioned, these worksheets will show up for your students under the home area or under the tasks area. You can assign time limits, also set date ranges that you would like the task to be completed by as well. As far as options go, there is this little tempo option that I just mentioned before, so you can enable that for your students. You can also decide if the student will get feedback whilst the worksheet or the test is running. So if you were running perhaps a more formal assessment, you may choose to turn that off for the student, so they're not getting that feedback as they work through the test. But if it was more of a supporting worksheet, then you can enable that so they get that automatic assessment and feedback coming straight to them. Okay, let's jump in now and have a little look. Actually, I'll just let's jump in now and just have a look at some of the harmonic dictation questions that are available. So we have a range of things here splitting up that we've split up into different types of worksheets to focus on specific kind of elements as well. So here, for example, students can focus on just doing soprano and bass dictation without having to worry about also transcribing the Roman numerals and so on. So let's start with that one. And again, I'll just preview that. Okay, so I get four replays on this particular this particular worksheet. And let's have a listen. Alright, and let's listen once more, and I'll just pop it. Alright, and so then we can bring up our answer here. We can play back each part individually if we like. We can also review the harmony that's attached to this particular excerpt. And coming really soon, which I'll be able to show you in a moment, is a little mixer control as well. So if you choose to, in version 6.1, which we're releasing hopefully within the next week, you'll have a little mixer that basically allows you, in the question, if you want students to be able to change the levels of each voice, you'll be able to enable that for your students. So that just gives them a few more opportunities to, if they're having trouble hearing the soprano and bass amongst the alto and tenor, you can reduce the level of just those voices a bit as well. Okay, let's just have a listen to one more of these. All right, so obviously not my finest work. So then we can see the correct answer against my answer, and all right, so clearly lots of issues there with what I have entered. All right, so we've got a nice little potential 6/4 there, finishing with a deceptive cadence as well, and so on. So I guess this particular drill, allows students to focus largely on just worrying about the outer voices without also having to think about the harmony. We have other questions that then allow them to combine those two elements together. Okay, let's have a quick, let me just check let's just jump in now and have a look at some of the harmonic dictation worksheets here. So again, these use the same harmonic vocabulary as what you've just seen in our soprano and bass dictation drills and exercises, but in this case, the student is just having to transcribe the Roman numerals. Okay. Let's pop something like that in and see what happens. Okay. So you can see here I'm getting partial credit for what I've done, but I clearly haven't nailed it. So, excuse me. So here we can see that I got a bit confused about the 5-chord in third inversion, and also misheard the 5/7 against the 5-chord there. So students get all that kind of nice feedback to help them differentiate between what they're hearing and what the correct answer is. And as before, I can play any of this back to reinforce those key concepts. All right, let's have a listen to one more of these, which may or may not include some applied chords. Let's have a listen. Let's pop something correct in there. All right, and again, we have 4 replays, so 3 remaining replays allowed on this particular question in this worksheet. Okay, and here we can, once again, we can see exactly where things went a bit astray. Okay, so that's the harmonic dictation, kind of isolated harmonic dictation side of things. And then we bring together the harmonic Roman numeral dictation plus the soprano and bass dictation questions together. And very soon we'll be releasing some of these that are completely automatically assessed. Some of the ones that you may have in your current version will have these questions set up as being manually assessed questions, but very soon, yes, these will be available as automatically assessed questions for you. And these look a bit like this. Okay, so what I can do here is I can switch between entering my note values or jumping to entering my chords, like so. But let's have a quick listen. And so on like that. So as I mentioned, in this particular version, I could enter all my note values. And add my chord symbols. And again, I'm sure your students will be doing much better than this, but let's finish with a tonic chord, at least, in this case. So in this particular question type or worksheet type, I would then submit this question, this worksheet, to be assessed by my instructor. But as I said, you won't have to do that for much longer once we just release this next little update. Okay, so I won't spend any more time in here. I guess the key points here, as I mentioned at the start, all the melodic, harmonic, rhythmic vocabulary is based around the actual AP music theory exams, and including the use of chromatic notes and the chord vocabulary, including perhaps just a single, in many cases just including a single secondary dominant as part of the progression, things like that. So providing real contextual exam level practice for your students. As I said, most of these worksheets also draw from larger question banks, so students can take them multiple times. So they are the kind of key points that may be of use when looking at assigning some of this type of content to your students. Okay, so that's kind of the dictation side of things. I will quickly point out that I don't have a worksheet set up here for you currently, but I'll just jump into the library area really quickly, which we won't have time to explore today, but in here there are a whole bunch of audio recordings, notation files and images. Some of them are drawing from the literature, some of them just pre-composed kind of more generic melodies and things that you can draw upon just to provide to your students at various kind of stages of their learning. But in here you can see if I select an audio file here, I can then see all these kinds of questions that are attached to it, from cadence type questions through to dynamics, interval recognition. So all these things that are based around real audio recordings, drawn in many cases drawn from the literature. But the main reason I came in here was that I wanted to point out that the search function here is really powerful. So if you come in here and search for AP Music Theory, you can find all sorts of things. And I should be able to get, yes, a bunch of other ones as well. You should be able to find all sorts of things that relate specifically to the curriculum that draw from these fixed questions. And the question type I was just wanting to demonstrate for you here is not the error detection. In fact, let me search for FR3, and that will bring up a bunch of AP content here based around the harmonic dictation types of questions. All right, so in here, this is what I'm looking for. So over here we have, for this particular progression that you can see here, we have a harmonic dictation question, we have the combined part dictation and harmonic dictation, we have the just transcribe the soprano and bass, but we also have, as a kind of preliminary exercise, we have just basically a two-part dictation exercise. All right, so here, rather than there being all four voices playing back, it's only the soprano and the bass playing back. So as a preliminary exercise for your students to build up to that kind of four-part transcription side of things, then these types of drills can be super useful. And here's the little mixer control I just mentioned before as well. Obviously, we only have two parts going on here, but once we release this new update, this can also be quite a useful tool for your students when dealing with, denser textures, four-part textures, where hearing the bass or the soprano may be more challenging. As the instructor, you'll be able to control whether these elements are enabled, disabled, and also how much students can, play with the mixer. We do kind of allow you to specify a minimum kind of volume that students can adjust each voice, essentially, so that they don't end up with a monophonic dictation question there. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out. We won't have time to explore the library in great detail, or really at all today, but again, we have other training videos and just info videos on all of that. I did a webinar on all this content as well about maybe a week or so ago. Okay, let's jump back to our outline here. So we've looked at all of that. Now we might jump into exploring some of the free response levels 5 to 7 content. So we include a whole range of kind of preliminary supporting worksheets, as well as some kind of more exam specific type things. But let's jump in and have a look at these. Musician, that's what we want. All right, so again, we'll largely, for the moment, look at this content through the tests and worksheets area, but there is lots of kind of practice, syllabus information and levels available under the practice area as well, and we'll hopefully get time to have a bit of a look at that a bit later. Okay, so first thing I'd like to jump into is just looking at some of the kind of preliminary harmony and voice leading type questions that are available. So we've tried to break down this content into lots of kind of smaller tasks so that students are able to isolate each of these key skills and develop them independently before having to bring them together in a actual part writing type question. So you can see there this content covering melodic motion, understanding everything from augmented diminished leaps, doubling omission rules, error ID, and so on. And I've got a few copies of some of these worksheets down here just so we can preview what they look like. So let's try the melodic motion worksheet initially, just to have a look at that content. So in here, we get a mix of different question types, from multiple choice like this, just so students have a key understanding of what each of the motion types actually means before they jump into some of the drills where they're actually having to visually identify the motion type. So student can, and then I can play back all of that if we wish to orally reinforce that. So lots of examples in here like that, dealing with each of the kind of basic motion types. I won't click through all of this now, but a whole range of different. Now again, all these questions are automatically assessed. All the results flow back to you as the instructor, and students are clearly getting that immediate feedback as they work through the worksheet. If you choose to turn that on, it's on by default for these worksheets, but if you want to deliver a formal assessment, you can certainly turn it off. Okay, let's have a look at this perfect consonances worksheet. Again, so this is dealing with everything from parallel, unison, fifths and octaves, hidden fifths and octaves, contrary fifths, octaves, unequal fifths, and then some error ID questions, which I'll show you in a moment. Essentially, it starts off again with just making sure that students actually understand the key concept of what is a parallel fifth, what is a parallel octave, before they get into doing some of the drills like this. So again, we've tried to provide really graduated content here so students can learn these key concepts in isolation. So initially, as a stepping stone, the student is asked to identify, they're already told what the error is, but they're asked to identify between which voices does this error occur. Parallel unisons, and then identifying again where the parallel unisons occur. Of course, they can submit their answer, play it back again to orally reinforce. Okay, so a similar approach is taken across each of these areas. Initially, it starts off with making sure the student understands the key concept as a definition, and then moves into identifying where the error actually occurs. Hidden octaves, and so on, covering each of these concepts. Unequal fifths. Again, in this case, identifying which voices it occurs between. And then finally down the bottom here, we get into some exercises, some drills in a more kind of contextual situation. So where the student actually has to go through and identify which error is actually occurring between the various chords in the displayed excerpt. So I can go through there, select all of those. All right, and obviously, hopefully your students do much better. And again, play that back. Okay, similar question type here. And then in this last little section, we have error detection, error ID questions. But in this case, where the student has to identify the actual error that has occurred. Okay, so lots of useful questions in there that you can use that again draw from a lot of the vocabulary that is key to the AP Music Theory curriculum. Okay, so as supporting worksheets, hopefully they can be really useful in just helping our students understand some of those key concepts. One of the last ones I'll jump into really quickly is just tendency tones. We won't cover all of these now, but so again, this isolates this key skill and has the student essentially identifying what is the tendency tone in the displayed excerpt, and then just getting this, developing the skill of being able to resolve with just that particular tendency tone in isolation without having to worry about all the other voice leading rules. So here, for example, I have to identify that the E is the leading tone there and needs to resolve to the F. And as we move on through some of the other entries here, introducing seventh as well. So the student now needs to identify that they have to resolve the seventh there and also resolve the leading tone there. And you can, of course, turn off those sounds, those feedback sounds, if they start to drive you or your students crazy. And then moving on to leading tone chords as well, and diminished leading tone chords there too. So lots of useful, hopefully useful content there for students. Again, really isolating specific kinds of skills. Okay, so that's kind of under that Unit 4 kind of test group there. If we just jump down to the theory, the exam kind of level worksheets here, we can see that there are a bunch of kind of exam level drills set up here for us. So let's jump in here. And the student here has the option to pop in their answer. And again, I'm just going to randomly click in some goodies for the moment. Switch voices to voice 2 here. And so on. So these particular worksheets are currently submitted for the instructor to grade, so they're manually assessed, but we will have some exciting things to talk about in the not too distant future in this regard. So lots of worksheets like this, and again, as I mentioned earlier, I guess one of the key points is that the harmonic vocabulary and everything that's already set up in these worksheets is all mapped exactly to the curriculum. So you don't need to go kind of chasing chord progressions to deliver this kind of specific material. It's all there already, all set up for you. Now I will show you some of the figured bass content, again, just as building blocks for your students under the figured bass here, that figured bass area here in the practice area. Okay, so they get questions like this where they essentially have to realise the figured bass that is displayed. And so on. Different vocabulary is introduced at each level. 6/4, let's see if we can get some other things to pop up. So getting into some seventh chords here. And so on, inversions of seventh chords. So again, lots of useful content here, hopefully that just helps students build those kind of key skills to support some of those exam level question types. So I just wanted to illustrate that really quickly. Okay, I just want to jump back now and just have a look at the free response question 7 here. So again, these are manually assessed questions in Musician, but again, there's lots of content in there that's ready to go for you that you can deliver to your students. So these questions, which is a format I'm sure you are all super familiar with, look like this. So the student can come in, enter their bass part, and so on, and then also add their figures. This is not going to be the most functional chord progression you've ever seen, but I just wanted to illustrate the kind of key workflow of the content. And so we would obviously complete that, all the instructions are up there for the student, and the question format is very much in line with the free response question 7 in the exam. Submit that, and you as the instructor can review that at a later stage when that's delivered within the worksheet, and mark that in the grading area for your students. So lots of kind of content that helps not only support those kind of part writing, figured base, and the kind of two-part composition type question types, but also some very much exam-specific content in there as well. Okay, what we might jump back to is our PDF. Make sure we don't run out of time here. Okay, so the sight singing side of things is obviously challenging for students on many different levels, depending on their how much singing they've done in the past, their instrument that they play, whether they're used to playing a pitch instrument, or if they're coming from say a percussion or drums type background. So the singing topics in Auralia and Musician, in Auralia rather, give students the ability to kind of practice these core skills in the privacy of their bedrooms, build up these kind of core skills, and not have to worry about being in a class environment, which is probably in many cases less of an issue at the moment, or impossible. But I guess it allows students to practice in this way, again, get that immediate feedback, listen to what they sang, compare it to the correct answer, and reinforce all that info. So Zoom plays havoc with my audio when I do this. So I have taken a little screen capture from earlier, and let me just take it back to the start here. And so basically, I would like to apologise in advance. As a jazz saxophonist, my vocal tone and control are not something that I particularly sought after. But hopefully, yeah, this does give you perhaps an idea of how a student might approach some of these topics. Okay, I'll hit play and let me know if you have any issues hearing the playback. So now we're just going to jump into some of the singing topics in Auralia and just see how they all work from a student's perspective. There are quite a few, but we might try interval singing to begin with, fourths, fifths and octaves ascending only. So now that I've set up my voice type, all the questions that I receive should be within my vocal range. Ma, ma. So I'm then presented with the correct answer on notation, as well as I can listen back to the audio. Ma, ma. Ma, ma. Now, if I do get something incorrect, ma, ma, then I get some nice feedback showing the correct answer. And I, of course, can also listen to the audio of my singing. Ma, ma. Okay, let's just jump quickly into a scale singing topic here. We might try level 6, which is a mix of major, minor forms and a few different modes. Ma, 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 ma. So then I get some nice kind of feedback there again, and of course can play my audio. Okay, let's quickly jump into perhaps a chord singing question. Level 1, which is just major root position and minor root position chords ascending. Ma, ma, ma. And finally, just so you can see how the sight singing topic works, let's jump in here. I will start with one of the lower levels here. Level 1, which is just 4-note melodies in C major. These will just use whole notes. Ma, 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 ma. Ma, 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 ma. Ma, 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 ma. And you can see as we move up through the levels, we get a mix of different tonalities. So in a minor key this time. And as we step through the levels, we get longer excerpts and we start to introduce different scale degrees, larger intervals as well within the excerpt. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of how the singing topics work in Auralia and how they can potentially support your students in just developing some of those core skills. Hope I haven't disturbed you too much with my singing abilities, but as I said earlier, perhaps this was a good example of perhaps how a typical student might approach these topics in the program. Okay, so everyone still seems to be here, which is encouraging. Basically, that's kind of an overview of how the singing content works. I did that one late last night, and yes, apologies for my lack of vocal skills, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of how these topics work. If I just jump back over to Auralia quickly, if you are using these topics, just a couple of quick tips. Basically, the first time a student goes into one of these topics, they should be presented with the microphone setup wizard, and this will kind of guide them through the setup of all of their input levels and things. But they can also access it through settings, microphone. So this setup here is really important to get accurate feedback and responses from Auralia. You can see I'm just using a MacBook Pro here, just using the internal built-in mic, but getting an input level that sits between these lines is definitely necessary. Students can adjust that. And this area over here certainly allows students to just have a bit of a play with a few different drill types and just get a feel for how the program responds to their singing, how it kind of hears them. The pitch assessment is actually super accurate. If anything, students maybe find it a little harsh in its assessment. So, but it does, you know, if they're scooping into notes and things and they take too long to get to their target note, then it is going to penalise them for that. So, hopefully that will make them, you know, really concise about the way they target each pitch and really centre it. As you heard from my singing, the program still does allow for, you know, a bit of variation in the pitches that are presented. Okay. So very quickly, we're starting to get close to time here. I did want to mention, just before we have a look at some of the multiple choice content, just for a couple of comments on the chat. So some of the content that I'm showing you today is new in a content update that is ready to go. So if you are using the full version of Auralia or Musician and are not seeing some of these worksheets, just pop a note in the Q&A just saying, please upgrade me to the latest content version, and we can get that going for you straight away, and you'll have access to all that content. And a little bit further down the track, we'll be, you know, rolling in some new kind of exciting content as well. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've kind of looked at the kind of all the free response areas now. The Other worksheets in the programs, again, deliver things within a exam context, so the exam level worksheets, a whole range of things. If I jump in here, just to give you a really quick example, this is kind of like a multiple choice theory exam that includes almost all the multiple choice question types that you will find in the exam. Many of these questions will draw from real literature, real musical examples as well. Okay, so here you can see the student can step through things from key signatures, identifying the scale, beaming questions, chord ID, and so on. A bunch of other things down here, things like identifying cadences and the non-harmonic tones that occur within the cadence, and jumping into some part writing errors that are more, again, represent the types of, the question format that's found in the exam itself. And then jumping into some more score analysis type questions. The chord on beat 1 of measure 8 is, and here we're dealing with 6/4 chord variations. So the student can come in, select their answer, and so on. So for this particular worksheet, I have feedback turned off as well. So I'm treating this more as a kind of formal assessment. As the instructor, you can opt to turn the feedback on for your student. You'll notice also up here, again, to create a little bit more of an exam environment, we have a timer going on this worksheet. So the student is required to complete this task within that time. So lots and lots of content in here, again, based around specific excerpts. But I'd also just like to duck back and just have a look at a lot of the worksheets that are there just to support a lot of those kind of fundamental skills as well. So we've created lots and lots in here that just deal with really specific little slices of information that students have to deal with across each unit. So unit 1.04, major scales and scale degrees. So this worksheet will include a bunch of different questions, from the student just having to identify whole and half step combinations for a major scale, through to writing of various scales. And again, depending on how you choose to use these or copy and edit them, students can enter their answers in a variety of different ways as well. G major ascending, and so on. Again, if I get something, oh, Zoom's just in my way there. If I get something a little bit wrong here, I can then, of course, play back my answer and play back the correct answer, both orally and visually reinforcing those. And then the final element in this particular worksheet is just dealing with scale degrees. So I won't jump through all of these now, but there are lots and lots of worksheets in there that deal with all these individual little building blocks for your students. Under the tests area, they are set up as worksheets that can be delivered, just simply assigned to your students. So you would normally have your class list over this side, and you can just assign any of those worksheets to your students when you feel the time is right. Again, we have other training videos that look at assigning, creating tests, editing existing tests as well. So if you're interested in that, you can find that on our YouTube channel or in our Facebook group, Auralia Musician Educators. So outside of worksheets, students also have the option, and maybe I'll demonstrate this in Auralia, as I kind of alluded to earlier, is to use the practice area. So the practice area differs from the worksheets in that students can just do free range practice across any of the topics here. Just depending on where they're at, it means more advanced students can, step up to a higher level or deal with perhaps a more difficult topic, whereas students who need perhaps more remedial work they can choose a topic here and work specifically on that. So if we were to jump into, say, chord progressions here, you can see the content again is broken down as per the unit guide levels here, introducing different harmonic vocabulary. So here we start to introduce the 2 chord in a minor key, introducing the 6 chord. So all these tiny building blocks that slowly introduce new vocabulary to your students. The chromatic side of things is done under advanced progressions. And again, here you can see we're starting to introduce in isolation secondary dominant chords, and then a mix of different applied chords here, introducing the leading tone, secondary leading tone chord, and so on. And then some combination levels that bring all those kind of core skills together. So for students, just to show you what this looks like, but it basically replicates what we've seen earlier. All right, so they might get question types like this, where initially they just have to identify where the applied chord occurs in the progression. All right, so I didn't hear anything in there. And you can hear we finish with a nice picky cadence there as well. Let's just try one more of these. Okay, and so then they can clearly play that back, see what's going on, and see where that chord occurred. So they're set up as kind of preliminary exercises, but then as we move further along, so the student can come in, and I think it was something like this. We'll find out in a moment. Whoops, wrong one selected. Again, I can play this back as many times as I want in the practice area if need be. And then choose my 6 chord here. All right, excellent, and then play that back. So lots of really useful kind of building blocks there. And then as we step up through the levels, we'll get longer excerpts, so on, dealing with different harmonic vocabulary. And so on. So I just wanted to mention briefly the practice area. As I said, it's great for students to do free practice and allows them to kind of focus on, if they're good at self-directing, allow them to focus on key skills that are kind of relevant to what they're feeling they need to work on at a particular time. The tests and worksheets feature is most useful for delivering, a more specific set of questions, a supporting worksheet, or perhaps a formal, a more formal assessment, just to check how they're going. All right, so we've kind of chatted about most of that. We don't have time to cover any of this today, but as I mentioned, you can use any of the resources that we provide in the programs, but you can equally just choose to create and customize your own as well. So the programs are super flexible. You can import your own audio, import your own notation images. You can choose to copy one of our syllabi and then edit it to suit more specific or personalized curriculum needs. And obviously, create your own worksheets and courses as well. Again, we have lots of training videos on all of that. Of course, the reporting and assessment side of things, all of these results flow back to you as the instructor through the reports area and also the grading area if you need to look at specific test results that use library questions. But in here, for example, we can look at everything from just an overall summary to see how student Tim Wilson has been going, this year. I'm not sure how much useful data I'll have here, but I've got a little bit. All right, so I can see this student has done these topics, has spent this long with the program, and is actually doing pretty good. It's not always how my results look. So we can see, yeah, exactly what they've done when they were last active, and provide really useful feedback. Typically in here as well, so I would see a breakdown of not only practice, but if I had have done any tests, they would also be presented here in a separate section, in addition to courses. Lots of other useful reports in here that we won't have time to get into today, but most of them are kind of fairly self-explanatory. All right, approaches to integrate with various LMSs. You may or may not be using things like Canvas, Moodle, Blackboard, but if you are and you want to investigate integration, just get in touch with us and we can get that set up. And again, we won't have time to look at this today, but obviously the content in the programs can certainly be used beyond just AP specific content, and to include a whole range of kind of different things in there for students, regardless of their age, ability, or whether they're coming from a classical background, contemporary background, or anywhere in between. So I did post some resource links into the chat window that may be of interest if you're looking to learn a bit more about how some of these other features that we've kind of mentioned in passing, how they work. Our YouTube channel, our Facebook group, it's a private group. That's the link if you wish to join. It's kind of been quite a nice kind of growing community, and some of you have probably discovered this webinar via that and joined from there. We're trying to encourage basically a community where educators can share information about how they're using the programs, issues they're having, things they like, feature requests, content requests, and just for educators to get a better idea of just best practice in using the programs and essentially getting the most out of them in their teaching environment. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's webinar. I hope it has been useful to those of you that are currently using the programs, and hopefully for those of you who aren't, it may potentially provide some options for you to consider for ways that you can support and deliver your AP music theory courses in these very, very kind of challenging times. I wish you all the best of luck for the rest of the year. Please do get in touch if you have any questions along the way. I will leave the Q&A and the chat open just for another couple of minutes, and I'll try and get back to you with any questions that may still be pending there. Thanks very much. Bye.